Yeah, I've been thinking about how should we live in this time. It's actually been a thing that I have been contemplating, ruminating on for decades.
Yeah.
Um, but it seems more pertinent now, more, mm, I don't know, something to really have some strong thoughts about. And have been able to keep it sort of nebulous as a focus, but when I try and bring it into kind of real reality, how should we live? Um, it gets a little more dicey. I know around climate, it's been like, what can we do? And that's kind of different from how should we live. So doing seems to indicate there's an action we can take, something we can do either to mitigate the situation, to adapt to the situation, to resist the situation. And certainly people are doing those things. But most of us can't do much to change what's actually happening. We are going to be at the effect of it. We can adapt to it some, so that's a doing, I think, that we could begin to think about doing. But we're really in the situation we're in, not so much because of what we've done, but because of how we've done what we've done. And I think it's the how that really speaks to how should we live, that's really where that is going in a deeper direction. How do we live that's different from the way we've been living, that is going to be more in harmony with the world that we hope will continue to exist? You know, adaptation is certainly part of that, but it's not the whole thing. Um, and I talk about partnering sometimes, and yes, but that still begs the question of how. What does that look like? Um, how do you feel you're in partner? How do you know that you're partnering? And what sort of change does that make in how we are every day? Because it's the everyday life that we still have to live. That doesn't disappear. I mean, we're still doing all those things every day that we always need to do. And so that can feel like we're not doing anything, and it can feel like we're trapped, because it's really hard to shift, to feel like there's a shift, to feel like you're really being different. And I think that's what I'm kind of stretching for, is how to put words and hands around that space in a way that's clear and makes sense, and has some teeth in it. And when I think like this, I have to go back to the values, because I really think they create a context for that. But even still, I mean, even looking at the values, it's not really clear how that shifts your living. It's the way of thinking about things. Yes, that's good, but how does it shift um, your everyday experience is a little harder to define or to understand. Um, and what that does is lead me actually to the prime directive as the sort of a litmus test, you know, um, to hold and to begin to have an awareness of where life is and how it can be supported and nurtured. We don't talk about nurturing and thriving much, but that's what makes thriving happen, actually, is the nurturing, the caring for. And caring for requires an engagement, a responsiveness to the other in order to care for, because you can't decide what the care for is. It has to be in relation to what is being cared. There's this dialogue that kind of happens. So as I'm ruminating it, this caring aspect of life, um, And I'm struggling to find or to be clear or to be able to articulate how it's different to care with than to care about. And caring for is really close. I don't know if it's right there, but it seems really close, because we can care about stuff all the time and we can bleed and cry and all of that. But caring for requires an action, an engagement, which is something we can do daily. Actually, we can live from that place, caring for everything around us with that nurturing mindset. And I think that might be the path, actually, to daily action is, and part of caring for, sometimes I really hate words, because so much of our language is outside language instead of coming from the inside, being with something. And so you say stuff, but it doesn't quite hit the mark. And when you care for something, I think you're expressing a kind of preciousness that other holds for you. And that preciousness is kind of what's been missing in a lot of our conversations. We do, we pay attention, but the preciousness, that holding things as really special and important, I think that's inherent and precious, that it's special and it's important. And that importance implies a relationship that needs to be nurtured and managed, to be maintained, and to be in integrity with itself. And I like that, because those are the pieces I feel that are missing so much in our hurriedness and in our pace and all that. We dismiss all that because it takes time to nourish. It takes time to care. And it takes time to know how to care. That's, yeah. So I'm trying to clarify my language and thoughts around that, so that it's really about to help people settle into that place and claim it. I mean, I guess that's really what I'm looking for, is to have people really claiming that place, and then to see what happens from that place, and to be consistent from that place, that place is where we come from, not all these other things. I want to be successful in my career, but how can I put that caring, nourishing piece in there? What do I care enough about to spend that kind of time with? Or to put myself into, to that extent, that if that's the decision making place, that's different than other people will notice me, or I'll have lots of money. Those things could come, but that's not the point, which is the shift we need to make that shift really move to a cherishing place. I think that's really what the key is. And to notice what we cherish, and to not pay attention to those things we don't cherish, not to get caught up in all the shoulda, couldas that we can do. And the converse of that, though, is that if you're really caught, like you got a family, you should cherish them and really come from that place instead of the shoulda, couldas, to really be centered in that cherishing.
Yeah, well,
anyway, what do you think?
Somehow I feel that one of the most important statements made along these lines was that young Japanese woman, who was Chinese, who wrote those books about
Organizing,
organization, and eliminating that which you didn't care for anymore. It's the physical manifestation of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yes.
And the more I still haven't read any of the books, but I have seen things on a YouTube or something. And the more I get into it, the more I realize that it's no wonder she was so popular. She really hits directly the nail on the head.
Yeah.
You have plenty of time for those things you really want to do if you toss out whatever is not that important. And to recognize, even things that have a claim on your time, maybe they're not important at all, let them go. Or see that, no, it's not important in this moment. Little Joey who's clamoring at my feet needs attention. It gives us starting point.
Yeah. I think you're mentioning little Joey really spoke to me in a way of noticing the patterns in our life, because we can get seduced by the immediate, gee whiz, Joey, you really don't need me right now. You're just interfering. I mean, your need is not as great as what I'm committed to right now. And then when you watch over time how often that's true, you can begin to get a different picture of what that little need really constitutes. Especially with children, I think that's really important, because they always feel like they're disrupting the flow of our adult life in some kind of way. And yet that's their life.
Yeah.
Is being the interruption. And that's not cool.
Yeah. And it's a failure to notice that their life to them is absolutely as important as whatever it is that I think that I need to be doing.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's where the cherishing comes in.
I mean, it's true of our relationship with our cat as well.
Yeah.
She's often just seems in total harmony with us now, but that's because for years, especially my wife, we've truly paid attention to what she needed, and learned her way of communicating and her language.
Yes.
And so she acknowledges that. So now she does seem to know that the fleas that are biting her, my wife Terry takes a little comb and combs them out. So she came in this morning, she was just jumping all over the bed at 6, And so Terry got up, and then she got up on the shelf where Terry combs her and was making a fuss. Terry said, "Oh, I know what you want." She got the comb.
Right.
Absolutely quiet after that. That's why she got us up.
Yeah. And she could trust that.
Yeah, she knew we would understand. It might take a little bit because we're slow, but
yeah, but that's huge. I mean, that's where trust comes from, is that you realize that people do see you and see your needs. I think about all these kids that are doing all these shootings in schools and stuff because they've not been seen. All the little signals that they've sent their parents about this isn't working have been ignored. And it's not that the parents wanted to be bad parents or wanted to hurt their kids. They just didn't pay attention.
Right.
They just didn't pay attention. They were so engrossed in their own life that they didn't notice their kids had a life and had needs that weren't being served. So I think the cherishing, to be in that place. And there's an appreciation also that comes when you cherish something. You cherish it because it's just wonderful. It just has something that is just really enticing, exciting, fabulous about it, that creates that emotional connection. And when that's the trigger, that's the state that that the relationship is in, it just colors the kinds of things you'll do and not do. Just makes things, and of course, instead of, huh, I have to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, and spatially, this is the case. I mean, in terms of connecting with the natural world, well, if you live in the middle of the city, oh, it seems impossible, you know, to be connecting. I mean, we do what we can. But when it's just relegated to going out to the, you know, the Appalachian Trail, you know, which is miles from here, you know, so you can hike in the mountains, and oh, that's a temple experience. I mean, that's like, yeah, okay, that's like taking the kid to, you know, the birthday party, you know, Chuck E. Cheese birthday party, which the kid is just thrilled with. I mean, it's not so thrilling for the adult, but you can enjoy their
excitement.
But it's like so totally out of the ordinary. You know, it's not part of the everyday life, if I'm making my connections properly here. There is a way, I think, to make this continuous, this connection, be it with nature, with the natural world, with an animal, with, you know, the children. There is a way to make it natural and connected all the time. And it does require giving up something.
You'll say more about that. How do you do that?
Well, I'm thinking of some women I've known who just were, you know, great mothers. I mean, they might have had plenty of things to do or issues, you know, with certain things, but when it came to their son or daughter, everything was dropped. It was like that. This one woman who, you know, really had some clinically apparent, you know, mental issues going on. You know, in that case, it was, you know, what was it? Depression. And yet, the moment her son needed something, bright, cheerful, she did it. I mean, it was just, she was totally there. And then she would, you know, have trouble on almost anything else. And so it's quite possible to do, you know, to come out of whatever it is that's bugging you, if it means enough. And I guess the trick is to, you know, find that meaning, you know, that connection, that meaningful connection, that quality of living, you know, interaction that you know you need, and there's someone you care enough about that you're willing to work in that realm. It seems simple. Of course I love you, you know, of course I want to share with you, and yet we don't.
Yeah.
It takes some remembrance every minute. Yes, I need to do this with you because I love you.
I think there's a thread too, at least there has been for me, that I can hang on to, and that's beauty. And beauty for me is physical. Oh, I just love to look at that. But there's also an exquisiteness, I guess, or an elegance in the mathematical world about how things are just perfect. You know, it's just perfect. There's an expression from a person that's just so perfectly them is beautiful, is really a treasure to be noticed and savored. And there are so many things like that, even in the city. You know, a shopkeeper's window, the smile on somebody's face. I mean, there's just all these precious moments that are beautiful, just exquisite, just perfect. And that is what makes my day when I can do that. I have to say, because beauty is really a very strong thing for me, that museums are one of my big, are one of my really big places to go, because it just validates for me the human species when I see all the wonderful things that people can create. It's just awesome that they can think of it, that they have the skills to do it, that they've done it. It's just incredibly validating, whether it's furniture or a piece of jewelry or decorations on a gun, armor. I mean, people put an incredible amount of attention into things that nurture them in some way. I mean, I can remember in my youth when there was a lot of smoking marijuana and that kind of stuff, that people would decorate pipes, spend great deal of time making these utensils that they used. I mean, it's a ritual, this thing gives me something that I treasure, and I want to create a beautiful space, a way of acknowledging that beauty, that cherishing.
I think you've come across the absolute repudiation of design by artificial intelligence. It's like, what for? Why are you doing that? What's the point? Oh, you have something a little nicer looking. So what? You don't have your hands in it.
Yes.
You don't have your soul in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
it's
totally
empty.
Artificial, even though
Yeah,
it looks great. Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's empty. We feel that emptiness.
I mean, that's a rant of mine. That's a pet. We all have pets, Why? I mean, that's why I love working, designing for people who are either building the thing themselves, the house, the porch, whatever it is, because some of my clients still are, even in the city. I love that. Or will be so involved that, they may be a pain in the neck to the contractor, but they're going to be totally involved in it, which I love. Of course they should, because then they will have created something.
Yeah, no, there's just something magical about what we do, what we make, what we create.
That can't be taken from us, that accomplishment. I mean, talk about meaning. I mean, that ultimately is why you love your children. I mean, that came from me.
Yeah.
And to take that away, I mean, the Israelis played around with that, where they actually took the children away. I mean, in the kibbutzim, the children lived in their own little house, and there were keepers who, watched over the children from early on. I mean, I guess they breastfed for 6 months or something, and then the mother was just a visitor.
Yeah.
And I've read some interesting studies about what that did to the children.
Yeah.
But it could only go so far. It seemed to make them much more resilient and independent. But to look on the heart of such a person, I've never had that. Well, yeah, I did know one who was married to my cousin, but I didn't get to know him that well. He was a kibbutzim child and resident. But he was a sweet man. I loved him. But it brings up a very real question, is that absolutely, essential connection something that if you discard, what are you left with?
Yeah. And it brings up for me actually dynamic stability, as weird as that sounds, but there's a range. So you can do that for a generation.
Yeah.
But when you do it several generations out, you're starting to stretch that fabric so thin.
And I think that's what happened. That's what they were beginning to find out.
So there's some leeway. Which is why one generation will work. you know, and you say, oh, it's fine. See, he turned out fine, but you can't do that for too far. Yeah.
And so that connects us into the conversation about the natural world. You know,
Yes.
we separated ourselves for a while. Some people pin that down to you know, the whole agricultural and revolution, because once there was enough food that you didn't have to spend your whole life in the thrall and
Right.
the fear, you might even say, of the natural world. You know, you could have time to do other things and cities could arise. That many choices were made that kind of epigenetically started to create the rift
Right.
that exists now, which have just gotten worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. Yeah. We've assumed that if it's okay now, it'll be okay in the future, because we haven't understood the limits of that permeability. Yeah, that range.
That brings up your book that you introduced me to.
Which one? The hospice?
Hospicing Modernity. I'm a third of the
Yeah.
way through. It's pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
I love her delicacy, you know, in terms of handling so many of the directions that it goes in. I mean, they're from a subconscious point of view, she's got the shovel in there and she's just shoveling the shit into your face, so you have to look at it, you know. And she so delicately explained what she was going to do and warning.
Yes. Don't come if you don't want the journey. It's okay.
I mean, so far it's like, yes, I'm glad somebody's finally said this. I mean, it's, you know, it
Right.
reminds me of what I'm saying, but she may, what I'm thinking, but she may touch on, I mean, I'm leaving it open and the 2/3 to
Right.
come. She may very easily touch on things that I have not looked at very carefully in the past, anytime. There's so much layering of
Yeah. Yes.
called subconsciousness that
Yeah.
but in speaking, I was talking to my friend about the book, and then something came up. I've been told about a book called The Science of Heaven.
Mm.
And it's written by a scientific writer whose name I don't remember for the moment, but he was very close friends with David Bohm.
Okay.
And David Bohm, the physicist, was very, very interested in plasma, you know, that exists
Right.
through the universe. And this, in fact, is very, I mean, they knew about plasma way back in the 1920s. And my favorite little book that I ran into when I was in college, name I can't remember, either the Nobel laureate chemist who wrote it or the book, but he talked about the dance of electrons in and out of reality. And he's talking about plasma. And he may have used the word or not, I don't know. But what David Bohm is coming to is that basically he's playing with the concept that the whole universe is conscious and plasma is the interconnection, because evidently there are currents that he and other scientists have been able to isolate or you know, visualize in some way, currents that remind him of the synapses, you know, the strands of brain cells that we have, you know, that's our connection to this entire thing, is what he would say. And that they seem to have interactions like right, you know, like brain cells do. In other words, it is a medium for consciousness.
I wonder if it's ether. the
Yeah.
ether that the
That could
ancients
be
have
the
talked about, you know, that
And
they send that
not
other,
just brain cells, it reminds me of the, you know, the brain of the, can't remember the word, but, you know, the fungi world.
oh, the mycelium.
That's the word.
Yes. Yep.
And that there's so many connections here once you start looking for it. Well, I mean, in the soil, I mean, it isn't just, well, I guess it's similar to the mycelium, but there's all kinds of interconnections that make the soil rich,
Mhm.
fertile,
And alive.
and alive. And, you know, I hate to go so farther afield because you were coming from such a great personal, you know, inquiry,
That's right.
but it's related.
Yeah.
You can, as you relate carefully to your own consciousness and how it might be connected with the all that is, you can't help but to fall into that consciousness that is from the all that is.
Yes. Everything else has the same connections. We're not,
They
yeah.
do. I mean, it's like it's always there. The difficulty is maintaining this separation from it. It's incredibly difficult. It's like the idea of maintaining a scowl in your face. It takes so much more effort. It's, you know,
It's more muscles, actually.
distorting so many muscles. You know, and so abiding by, you know, all of these layers of subconscious belief systems and, you know, modernity, which Oliveira was the writer of hospicing. You know, what she mentions, that you know, the modernity is just sort of this layer of things that's been laid upon us. I mean, in the Middle Ages, they could have talked about modernity, but it was a different level of things. But truly, there's a pattern now that covers us all.
Yeah. Yep.
And you know, I see it's really interconnected with even into the universe. I mean, there's no getting away from it. We're a part of something much, much greater than, and you know, but it does come down to even our most meaningful, specific interaction, which is, say, with my wife. Don't have children right now. Well, the stepson that I brought up, who I feel almost as directly related to as anyone on the planet. He's 35, he's 36, just had a birthday. But, you know, so I even have that, but these are elemental experiences in this universe of consciousness. Even my relationship with Zach, you know, my stepson, I think we need to start realizing this, just how important even these little things are.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
They're not little.
Yeah. I did, as you were talking, this thought flitted through my head that, because I loved your statement that the work it takes to stay out of connection. And the thought was that there is a part of us that is so overwhelmed by the ecstasy of life that we balance that. That's the separation, is a way of sort of dampening the excitement of living. That it just feels so overwhelming if we were to just be in that state. I know the spiritual leaders talk about this state of bliss. And I know I have experienced that, and there is a practice actually of learning to live within that. because it's much easier to step out of it and live than to stay in it and live. Because there's a distraction that getting out of it sort of cuts off that connection a little bit, because you turn your attention to something else. So the skill is keeping that attention and acknowledging that space and acting at the same time. But
Yeah.
it's so easy to get out of it, to just shift your attention so that you're not in that state. So I think that's very interesting to explore, how we choose to be out of bliss.
And the body has a lot to do with it. My body, for instance, at this age, if I get overexcited, it tells me.
Mm,
I guess it's partly the heart, but not that I'm going to have a heart attack, but it just cannot. It gets overwrought.
yeah,
Yeah. So it means, so there's a balance in all things.
yeah,
I mean, that teaches me that, that at least, I don't know, can't speak for the young man I once was or for younger people, but it tells me that I can't do that now, to just stay in a sort of high position excitement. But there's a beautiful balance,
yeah,
where there's a lightness of living.
yes,
But but that may be just an old person thing. I don't know. I mean, because I wasn't able to really experience when I was younger and totally fit,
yes, yeah. So back to beauty, because I think that's the trigger. I really do. Acknowledging and being sensitive to that and cherishing that enough to want to keep it.
Yeah, elegance is a good
Yeah.
way from
Yeah.
the physicist point of view, the elegant solution. I mean, that's true in architecture.
Yep. It's true in so many things. Yeah,
Screen.
you want.
Wow, this is just really hitting all the elements.
Yeah. I mean, I have to think that that's how life feels, because we're so delicately balanced. I mean, that's why people think there's got to be somebody controlling it, because it's just so perfect. If it was, if we were too many megahertz this way or too many megahertz that way, it never would have happened. But perfection is all around us, because that's what existence is. It couldn't exist if it wasn't perfectly aligned to do so. I mean, that perfection is just awesome, just awesome.
And to get back to Bohm's idea, if the universe itself is conscious, I mean, if the field of consciousness permeates and rules in some sense, the universe, then of course these sort of connections make total sense.
Yeah.
And anything that doesn't make much sense.
It doesn't last long.
No.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's things get pretty clear when you start to allow those sorts of should I say standards,
Oh, you froze.
Oh, yeah.
So you said standards. What did you say after that?
A ground of being. Oh,
you froze again. Grump. Come back, Robert. Come back. So the ground of being, the I don't like the use of the word standards, actually. It feels too static to me. I think there's dynamics. I think there are criteria. There's a range. Those words I can work with. Standards, there's a sort of a subtle resistance that comes up because it feels too static. It feels too linear. Yeah, it kind of frustrates me. Standards become rules, become all this rigidity, all this structure that wants to confine flow instead of being responsive to flow. And I think that's the key that makes me nervous about that kind of stuff. And I think that's what part of that rebellion is about. We feel innately there are limits, but the limits are porous. They're not that defined. And we have lived in a world, I'm back to how should we live? We've lived in a world with standards and rules, and lived in a world that's tried to break those standards and rules. And neither one has really worked. So I'm riffing off your standards because I feel they're restrictive, and standards become rules. And that's a very linear way of thinking about the world. And I think that's part of the morass that we're in. People have rebelled about those standards. There's a sense that they don't work, they don't hold, they need to change, all that kind of stuff. But we've kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater, because there are criteria, there's ranges. I mean, it's not like there aren't limits, but the limits are porous. And they reflect the rhythms of life. They kind of flow and meld and that kind of stuff. And we have a hard time with that. We want it precise and clear, but it doesn't work. And so how to understand the range that we can be functional in and see it as a range, and that gives us fluidity, and it gives us context, and it can alert us to when we're at one end of the range or another end of the range, and begin to come back to the center. But we have the luxury of flow, which standards don't seem to provide.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you. It's like in the scientific world, they've set limits on everything. In other words, entropy is supposed to be the death of the universe, but they don't take life into account.
Right.
Life is the counterbalance to entropy.
Yes, exactly.
I don't care, I mean, it is.
Yes.
So
yes.
With that in mind, if we've had our mind set on entropy, which I gather the scientific world has, and there's so many ways that within our culture and civilization right now, we see things falling apart.
Yes, yeah. And we actively are working to make that happen.
We're working to make that happen. I mean, who knows what is possible if that were not accepted? I mean, that's just not what's happening. I mean, so, and I bring the case in point are some of these sharks that they claim are 300 million years.
Yeah.
that they've basically been unchanged. Not to mention, the stingrays. No, is it stingrays or just
cockroaches.
Portuguese man of war who don't die? They do not die. I forget exactly what they do, but they just keep regenerating. Their life eternal.
Yeah.
And there are all kinds of examples in the natural world. There really are.
Well, that's what life's all about.
We're dead set against it.
Yes. That's where for me, the prime directive is that's exactly right. It's all about life.
Glad you corrected, how this my conversation was diverting. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely correct. That's a major drawback for humanity, is that we believe in entropy.
Entropy, yeah, and we treasure it in a very I don't know, treasure. There's a kind of what's the attitude?
Satisfaction.
Oh, it's a get back at you kind of attitude. We see it in other things too, where okay, I had my hose stolen off the front of my house day before yesterday. And I can hear the person saying, well, you left it out so I can take it. So, and it's that attitude, which is what is putting us into the grips of entropy. It's like, oh, so life is there. Well, look what I can do to take it away. I can do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to define. I don't know exactly.
In your face.
Yeah. But that attitude is the one that seduces you into destroying what you love. And people will claim the love, but at the same time want to just hurt it. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what that connection is or how that happens, but I certainly see it happening. I see it expressed. And I think as a culture, we've kind of gotten that, and maybe part of it is that, well, if you love me, do you love me now? Let's see how bad I can be. Do you still love me? That testing of that. Who's stronger? I don't know. There's
war, for instance.
Yeah.
Kind of a major policy choice.
Yeah. And that's something we're going to have to give up. We can still fight, but we just can't do war. If two rulers don't like each other, we'll put them in a room and see what happens. Let them do whatever they need to do. It's okay. They just don't take everybody else with them. They got to do it themselves. Oh, what a difference. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah, I've thought about that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where Putin is, actually. He really wants to be in a room with somebody and he doesn't quite know how to manage it.
Well, when I was working as an NGO with the UN, I met several former heads of state and, was quite struck by the fact that they were absolutely human, just like me. Now, let me back that up a little bit, but there's this aura that they carry from having held tremendous authority. It carries through, in their the essences of their being. But then you see them laughing and joking, and well, in this one case, I had to meet this guy. I'd broken my collarbone the week before doing some stupid bicycling with Zach. So where they were everyone was in suits and I was in just a white shirt and had my arm in a sling. And I forget the guy's name, he's from Costa Rica, I think, former president of Costa Rica. And, just his interaction with that, just gave me a sense of his absolute humanity. Then I'm sure you'd find some of that with Putin. I mean, he has children,
Yeah.
he's got other stuff going on too, but
Yeah, people love George Bush. He was a fun person to be with. Yeah.
but it's
Yep.
people get so far out of touch that they're unreachable, it seems. And yet in the right conditions, they really aren't. The only one I have my doubts about is Donald Trump Sr.
Yeah, no, that's where mine went too, because I haven't found that there are a couple of places where I feel he's been sort of touched. He seems to have had a connection to his first wife when she died. There was a little bit, not much. He certainly didn't allow a lot of it, but there was an attention that went there that seemed to have meaning.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. And I think with his daughter also, there's a little bit of that, but he's afraid of that. It feels controlling. It feels like he's not in control, which is true. Which is true.
Yeah, I mean, if you say controlling, what that means is that he's not in control of the fact that that's totally a part of him. And for him to deny it, it takes a lot of work, and you're never really in control of that denial.
That's right.
Always pecking away at your consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why he requires people to adore him so much.
Yeah.
Because they put his focus back on him. And that's what he can control, is the focus on me. That's what he thinks is control, that if he cares for others and puts his focus on others, he's not thinking about himself. And that feels out of control, because then they have to think about him. If he's not thinking about him, then somebody else has to. Oh, it's just such a twisted.
We all have this. I mean, I can certainly
Yes.
recognize that in myself, but
Yep.
he seems to have it more than anyone I've ever.
Yes.
I've never met him. I've met a lot of interesting people, but I've never met him in the past. But he does not seem to be able to get beyond it.
No, and I'm sure he's very charming when he wants to be. I mean, that's been my experience with other people with that same personality disorder, not to his depth, but it's amazing how so the difference between I can trust myself and I'm right. There's a confusion there. So I have to be right in order to trust myself, instead of I trust myself. And then therefore, and that confusion is just pretty horrible, actually, because it's so constrictive, so incredibly constrictive. Yeah.
Well, the point is not to let him get, actually take control of our lives.
No, but noticing that, because other people are there too. And again, like you said, we all have that piece of us, which is why we can recognize it. We resonate with that piece that's inside too. It's not outside of us by any means. So, yeah.
And then again, I see the value of conversations like this, and the work that we're individually doing is to provide a conduit. There's a conduit toward raising, the level of consciousness. or
Yeah.
let's just say doing away with whatever obscures
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah,
what's totally always been there in
yes,
terms of
yeah.
available, consciousness of life and what it is and everything else. Because you and I have glimpses of it. The way we talk about it, it's clear,
Yep.
but there's always more.
Yep. Thank you for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you too. I guess I gotta do some more work today. No, actually I have to do some work because I was out all morning.
And I have to go too. So nice. So wonderful.
See you. Oh, so I won't be there, won't be on next week. So I'll be,
Okay. All right.
so just to let you know. But
Okay.
2 weeks
Thank you.
from-
Okay. All right. Okay. Bye-bye.